Emotional exhaustion, Wikipedia audio. Emotional exhaustion is a chronic state of physical and emotional depletion that results from excessive job and/or personal demands and continuous stress. It describes a feeling of being emotionally overextended and exhausted by one's work. It is manifested by both physical fatigue and a sense of feeling psychologically and emotionally drained. See also the law of emotional exhaustion. Most emotional exhaustion research has been guided by Maslach's and Jackson's three-component conceptualization of burnout. This model suggests burnout consists of three interrelated parts: emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and diminished personal accomplishment. Diminished personal accomplishment refers to negative evaluations of the self. The level of emotional exhaustion which is experienced by an employee is influenced by a variety of determinants, such as personal resources, coping strategies, emotional culture, and supervisory regulation of display rules. Burnout. Personal resources, such as status, social support, money, or shelter, may reduce or prevent an employee's emotional exhaustion. According to the conservation of resources theory, people strive to obtain, retain, and protect their personal resources, either instrumental, social or psychological. The core's theory suggests that people must invest resources in order to protect against resource loss, recover from losses, and regain resources. Therefore, those with greater resources are less vulnerable to resource loss and more capable of orchestrating resource gain, whereas, for those with fewer resources, ongoing resource loss may result in a rapid influential loss spiral. In a field study, those experiencing higher levels of job autonomy, low task complexity, supervisory support, and the internal locus of control, tend to experience lower degrees of emotional exhaustion. Similarly, researchers reveal that even though higher degree of using emotion regulation on the job is related to higher levels of employees' emotional exhaustion, when employees believe that they have autonomy in their job behaviors, emotion regulation, that is otherwise exhausting, is not associated with exhaustion at all. Another field study, basing on a sample of call center workers in a large telecommunications corporation, indicate that employees who are highly identified with the service work, possess higher levels of self-efficacy, and receive social support from their supervisors, are less likely to experience emotional exhaustion. Researchers suggest that emotional exhaustion may be a result of using inadequate strategies in order to cope with problematic events on the job. Accordingly, there are empirical evidences that employees who tend to use more control strategies, which are considered more productive strategies, tend to experience lower levels of emotional exhaustion than do those who tend to use more escape strategies, which are considered inadequate strategies. Regional and national cultures have been shown to have different norms for emotional expressions, and vary in their expectations for regulating and expressing emotions in the workplace. Such differences are part of the emotional culture of those cultures. For example, some cultures are more institutionally oriented, with strong norms about regulating emotions to fulfill institutional roles and standards, whereas other cultures are more impulsively oriented that value expressing unregulated emotions. An example of a culture with a strong institutional orientation toward emotions is the United States, due to the strong American norm to act positively and hide negative feelings, whereas France can be used as an example of a country with a more impulsive orientation toward emotions. Determinants. People within cultures that tend to use an impulsive orientation to understand and evaluate social situations are likely to feel more personal control over their expressions than people within institutional-oriented cultures, resulting in more of a buffer against strain and emotional exhaustion. On the basis of those arguments, an organizational research investigated the influence of emotional culture on the degree of emotional exhaustion experienced by employees who work on jobs that include interaction with clients and emotional labor demands. In this study, among employees working at such jobs, those who belonged to more impulsive-oriented cultures showed lower degrees of emotional exhaustion than those who belonged to more institutional-oriented culture. Supervisors are likely to be important definers of interpersonal demands at the job level, given their direct influence on workers' beliefs about high-performance expectations. Moreover, supervisors' impressions of the importance of display rules influence the employees' impressions of these display rules. Recent study also suggests that employees who hold the same job may experience the same display rules differently if they work for different supervisors, who vary in the emphasis they place on their subordinates' interpersonal role requirements, and by so, experience different levels of emotional exhaustion. Such that having a supervisor who places greater importance on interpersonal job demands results in greater emotional exhaustion. Current models of how emotion regulation impacts strain focus on intra-individual processes that operate within the mind and body of the person regulating the emotion, but these models have several limitations. Code suggests a social interaction model that takes into account these limitations. In this model, work strain is predicted according to Code, interpersonal feedback is far more potent than intra-individual feedback, and dominates if the two processes are in opposition. The social interaction model suggests an alternate route by which to proceed with theory building and future research. Personal resources. Coping strategies. Researchers have linked emotional exhaustion to a plethora of ailments, and a general breakdown in feelings of community. However, a growing body of research has begun to demonstrate that emotional exhaustion can have deleterious consequences for organizations as well. Emotional culture. Supervisory regulation of display rules. Social interaction model of effects on work strain. Implications. For example, Russell Cropanzano and his colleagues, in their two field studies, indicate that exhausted employees show lower organizational commitment, lower job performance, less organizational citizenship behaviors directed toward the organization and their supervisors, and higher turnover intentions. They suggest that emotional exhaustion can be seen as a cost that qualifies the value of any benefits received through employment, and so that an organization, which overworks its employees to the point of emotional exhaustion, may be seen as unfair. Similarly, longitudinal studies found that exhausted employees show not only lower job performance, but also more absences, and greater likelihood of seeking employment elsewhere.